What's going on, geeks? This video is going to be as short and as sweet as possible. Put it simply, we could be getting up to 3 distinct brand new Mac models as early as Apple's March event. So I'm going to tell you which one I'm going to be picking up and which one you should be getting depending on your needs. So if that sounds like the video you came to see, hit the subscribe button and click the bell so you don't miss as we cover your favorite techosophy. I'm Chris Grant Jr. It's the Granny Geek Show. Alright, so diving right in, over the weekend we got several reports and rumors of us getting not 1, not 2, but 3 brand new Mac models, and these are the hotly anticipated redesigned M1 Pro and M1 Max, Mac Mini, that's the high tier Mac Mini, as well as the often on and off rumored iMac Pro. But here's the surprise. We could be getting an M2 version of the MacBook Pro at this event as well. Now, we haven't heard a whole lot about the MacBook Pro. We heard a lot more about the M2 MacBook Air, but it would make more sense to release the Pro and the Air at 2 bookends of the year so that they're not competing as much as the M1 versions did, where a lot of people just went with the Air because there weren't that many differences. Now, the M2 chip is going to be Apple's next generation of silicon, which no doubt will boast several performance improvements. But even despite that, I'm still going to be picking up the redesigned M1 Pro and M1 Max Mac Mini, and I'm going to explain why it is the best option for most people. So let's start by comparing it to the hotly anticipated iMac Pro. Now, you're probably thinking, Chris, when the iMac Pro drops, it is going to be the best Mac ever made to date. And I really wouldn't argue with that. I mean, this thing is supposed to have 2 to 4 chip versions of the M1 Pro and M1 Max jammed into a super thin, redesigned, very similar to the M1 iMac version of the iMac Pro. And get this, it could have, and we don't know this for sure yet, up to a 32-inch Pro XDR display with 120 hertz refresh rate. That's going to be all kinds of beautiful and buttery smooth. But while I would agree that it'll be the best Mac to date, said date will be over as soon as it launches. And by this, I mean the philosophy that I've had with Mac Mini versus iMac for the longest time, and I probably will continue to have, is simply versatility, upgradability, and flexibility. And that comes to peripherals, your displays, your keyboard and mouse. And you can switch out keyboard and mouse with the iMac as well, but primarily with the display. What happens when our cameras start shooting 8K and above in some sort of super HDR in the next 5 years? Now, think about it this way. If you break your display, you've got to get rid of your M1 Pro and M1 Max. If display technology completely gets upgraded and they're doing 3D HDR or something like that, you just don't know. Now, you not only have to sell your display, but you're selling your 2 to 4 chip versions of the M1 Pro and M1 Max. You have to get rid of those and buy another machine and then a display to fit with it until Apple comes out with their own version of that. I don't have time to wait for that, so I'd rather get the most powerful version, best bang for your buck, that I can upgrade easily. Plus, when you look at the price difference, the Mac Mini redesign is probably going to be coming in at around $1,000 to $1,299, whereas this iMac redesign is going to come in, I would imagine, at least at $24.99 to start. That's a big asking price for something that is not only not portable, but is not very upgradable at all. Also, just in terms of upgradability from the store, if the iMac is coming in at $1,000 over the Mac Mini, we know how much Apple likes to charge for their storage and RAM. I could spend a whole nother $1,000 getting terabytes of storage and plenty of RAM, where you're kind of stuck with the base model iMac. And of course, the iMac base model may be competing in RAM and storage with a similarly priced Mac Mini, but from what we've seen from the M1 Pro and M1 Max versions of the MacBook Pro, getting a a thicker chassis like in the Mac Mini with better airflow and cooling, I would imagine the Mac Mini could drive those chips a little bit further and a little bit harder than even the MacBook Pros can, and that it's plenty of power for somebody like me with my use case. From there, let's move on to the MacBook Pro, because you're probably thinking, okay, but this is the new generation of silicon. Why would you take the M1 Pro and M1 Max over the M2? Well, this comes down to something simple: single core and multi-core. I am a hardcore multi-core user, and heavy CPU, heavy GPU tasks, video editing and rendering, music production, graphic design, you name it. And the M2 is likely, while having multi-core improvements, the largest improvement is going to come in the single core task category. This means things simple like browsing the web or checking your emails or text messaging, things that don't require multi-core hordes of processing power. So yes, I fully expect day-to-day tasks to be much faster on an M2 device than I would on the M1 Pro and M1 Max. And for single core tasks at lightning speed, I really look no further than my M1 iPad Pro, which already has Thunderbolt and XDR display, and iOS is not even pushing it to its limits. So for that kind of stuff, I'm going to stick with the M1 iPad Pro. And you might be thinking, okay, what about the M2 iPad Pro? Once again, the problem is not the hardware, it's the software. iOS really isn't doing anything with the iPad in order for me to notice a difference between something like an M2 chip in an iPad Pro and an M1 chip in an iPad Pro. This theoretical M2 iPad Pro that we don't know is going to be seen anytime soon. Now, don't get me wrong, multi-core heavy-duty tasks can still be done on the M2. I know this because, well, it can be done on the M1. I'm rocking an M1 Mac Mini right now, and it can do 4K editing, multi-layered renders in DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, you name it. So this M2 MacBook Pro is going to be a beast, don't get me wrong, but in multi-core score, I don't expect it to outperform an M1 Pro or M1 Max, and that's why I want the best, the biggest bang for my buck that I can get with the Mac Mini that I'm simply not going to get with the MacBook Pro. Plus, you're looking at the Mac Mini redesign that could potentially come in colors. I don't really care about that. What I care about more are the ports. The M1 Mac Mini only has 2 USB ports, and it's a pain. It's dongle city over there on my desk because I have so many peripherals to plug in, from external MIDI keyboards to external storage and SD cards and USB receivers. It's a mess. It really is. So I would really love to see 4 USB-C Thunderbolt ports on the Mac Mini, as most of my peripherals use USB-C or Thunderbolt at this point. So it's going to make the desk setup so much cleaner, so much nicer. I would like to work on a desk setup video actually once this thing drops. So that's going to be cool. But guys, that is why I would choose the Mac Mini, and I would implore most people to choose the Mac Mini if you don't absolutely need portability over the M2 MacBook Pro and even the M1 Pro and M1 Max iMac Pro that we could potentially be seeing in March. Either way, guys, I'm so excited for this event. It's going to be insane. Getting 3 new Macs, I don't even know when the last time that happened was. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed the video, if it was helpful to you, hit the like button. That tells the algorithm, hey, this video can help other people too. Also, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Leave me a comment down below. I love chatting it up with you guys after the drop of the brand new video. So let's talk down there, have that conversation. Keep it locked here as we cover your favorite tech-osophy. I'm Chris Grant Jr. It's the Granny Geek Show.